I'm 86 years old now. My name is Daniel Whitmore. After my wife Clara passed away, people kept saying the same things over and over again. They told me I shouldn't live alone anymore. They said a man my age needed constant help. Some suggested I move closer to my children. Others quietly assumed I wouldn't manage much longer on my own. At first, I nodded politely and let them speak. People mean well when they say those things. But the truth about growing older is something very few people understand until they experience it themselves. The strongest support you will ever have in life rarely comes from outside. Not from family, not from friends, and certainly not from the world deciding to take care of you. The most reliable support comes from the things you build inside your own life long before you need them. That may sound a little harsh, maybe even uncomfortable to hear. But over the past 20 years, I have watched many people around my age slowly lose pieces of themselves. They became dependent on others for small things at first, then for larger things, and eventually they stopped making decisions about their own lives entirely. But I have also watched a few people remain steady, independent, and surprisingly peaceful well into their 80s and even their 90s. And the difference between those two groups was not luck. It was preparation. Now, before I continue, I want to ask you something honestly. If you're watching this right now, how old are you? Are you in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, or maybe even older? Write your age in the comments below. I read those comments carefully because it tells me who I'm speaking to. And sometimes seeing other people's ages reminds us that we are not alone in thinking about these things. Because growing older is something we all share, whether we talk about it or not. The first thing you must protect is your body, especially your ability to move. I didn't fully understand how important this was until I turned 76. One morning I woke up and sat on the edge of my bed, and something felt different. My legs felt stiff, heavier than usual. When I tried to stand up, my knees resisted like rusty hinges on an old door. For a moment I just sat there, gripping the side of the mattress. And the thought that crossed my mind was frightening. This is how it starts. You see, I had watched it happen before. My old neighbor, Mr. Leonard Graves, had always been a strong man. He worked with his hands his entire life. But when he turned 73, climbing stairs started bothering him. So he began avoiding them. Soon he avoided walking long distances too. Within a year he barely left his house. Within 2 years he needed someone to help him just to get to the front door. His mind was still sharp. His personality was still there. But his legs had failed him. And when your legs fail, your independence slowly disappears with them. Sitting on my bed that morning, I realized I had a choice. I could ignore what I was feeling and hope things improved on their own, or I could start doing something about it immediately. So that very day I started walking. Nothing dramatic, nothing heroic. Just a simple 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. Some days the weather was cold. Some days my joints complained. Some days I didn't feel like going at all. But I went anyway, day after day. I also started doing small movements while sitting in a chair, lifting my knees slowly, rotating my ankles, rolling my shoulders. Gentle movements that kept the body awake instead of letting it stiffen. Now at 86, I can still walk to the grocery store 2 blocks away. I can still carry my own bags. I can still climb the few steps leading to my front porch without asking anyone for help. And let me tell you something very important. The ability to move is not just about muscles. It is about freedom. Because the moment you lose the ability to move easily, you start needing permission from others just to live your life. Tell me something in the comments. Do you walk regularly? Even 10 or 15 minutes a day? If you do, write, I move every day. And if you don't yet, maybe today is the day you begin. Because the body responds to consistency more than intensity. The second thing that protects your independence is learning to need less. When I was younger, I believed security meant accumulating more things, more savings, a bigger home, nicer possessions, better comforts. But life has a way of teaching lessons we didn't expect. I learned this lesson when I was 69. That was 3 years after Clara passed away. One evening I was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by paperwork, bills stacked in small piles, heating costs, maintenance expenses, property taxes that seemed to increase every single year. And suddenly it struck me that I was working very hard just to maintain a life that no longer made sense. The house was too large for one person. Half the rooms were empty most of the time. Yet every month I was paying to heat them, clean them, and maintain them. Then I thought about an old colleague of mine, Arthur Collins. Arthur had done everything right. He saved diligently, retired comfortably, and bought a beautiful house near the lake. But the lifestyle he created required a lot of money to maintain. Large house, expensive habits, constant upgrades and repairs. By the time he reached 75, his savings were disappearing faster than he had expected. Eventually, he had to start asking his daughter for financial help. And every time he asked, you could see something inside him shrink just a little. It wasn't the money that hurt him. It was the loss of independence. I didn't want that future. So I made a decision that surprised a lot of people. I sold the house. I moved into a smaller one-story home that was easy to maintain and fully paid off. I sold the second car that I barely used. I simplified my spending habits. I learned to cook simple meals again instead of eating out regularly. And something interesting happened. I didn't feel poorer. I felt lighter. Because when you need less to live comfortably, nobody has leverage over you. You don't have to ask for help unless you truly want to. You don't have to accept conditions you dislike. And perhaps most importantly, you keep your dignity. Let me ask you something honestly. Do you think life becomes more peaceful when we simplify it? Or do you believe comfort always requires more and more things? I'm curious what you think. Write simple life or more comfort in the comments. I read those thoughts carefully because the way we think about these things shapes our future more than we realize. The third thing that protects your independence is your health, not luck, not genetics alone, habits. Many people believe health in old age is mostly a matter of fate. But after watching dozens of friends grow older alongside me, I can tell you something very clearly. Habits quietly shape the body over decades. My younger brother Michael never liked hearing advice about health. He enjoyed his cigarettes. He enjoyed heavy food. He believed doctor visits were unnecessary unless something was obviously wrong. For years, he seemed perfectly fine. Then, when he turned 72, the consequences arrived all at once. High blood pressure, heart complications, early diabetes. Suddenly, his life revolved around medical appointments, medication schedules, and constant worry about what might happen next. He didn't die, but his freedom changed dramatically. Meanwhile, when I turned 70, I made a quiet promise to myself. Walk daily. Eat real food most of the time. Drink water instead of sugary drinks. Sleep properly. And visit the doctor for routine checkups even when I felt perfectly healthy. None of these things were exciting, but they were consistent. And consistency over time becomes powerful. Today I take very few medications. My doctor tells me my heart is strong for my age. My blood pressure stays stable. And because of that, I spend far less time worrying about my health than many people around me. Health is not perfection. It is maintenance. And maintenance is far easier than repair. Let me ask you something important. When was the last time you did something small but positive for your health? Maybe a walk, maybe choosing better food, maybe going to bed earlier. Share it in the comments. Your answer might encourage someone else reading it. Because sometimes a single comment from a stranger can motivate someone to start taking better care of themselves. And that is a powerful thing. What I'm telling you today may sound simple, but these small decisions shape the entire experience of aging. And we're only halfway through the lessons I learned, because the next two things might be even more important than the first three. They determine whether a person grows older with strength or slowly becomes dependent on the world around them. But we'll talk about those in a moment. There is another truth about growing older that people rarely talk about openly. It's not about your body, your money, or even your health. It's about your ability to handle loss without letting it destroy who you are. Because after a certain age, loss becomes part of life. You lose people you love. You lose abilities you once had. You lose routines that once defined your days. And the real question isn't whether those losses will happen. They will. The real question is whether you can continue living without collapsing under their weight. I learned this lesson when I was 68, the year Clara passed away. We had been married for 46 years. Nearly my entire adult life had been spent beside that woman. We had built routines together that felt permanent. Morning coffee at the kitchen table, Sunday walks in the park, quiet evenings watching the news together. Then one day, the chair across from me was empty. For weeks, the silence in the house felt unbearable. I would reach for a second coffee cup before remembering there was no one there to drink it. I would turn to say something in the evening, only to realize I was speaking to an empty room. Grief does strange things to the mind. It slows time. It fills the smallest corners of your life. But after those first months, I realized something important. I had two possible paths in front of me. The first path was to let the grief become my entire identity. I could stop doing the things we used to do together. I could stay inside the house more and more. I could begin depending on my children to visit frequently, just to give my days meaning. Many people choose that path without realizing it. The second path was harder, but it was also healthier. I could allow myself to grieve, but still continue living. So I kept my routines. I continued my morning walks, even when they felt lonely. I kept cooking proper meals instead of surviving on sandwiches. I continued visiting the small bookstore downtown where Clara and I used to browse together. At first, every one of those moments hurt. But over time, something slowly changed. The pain softened. The routines became mine instead of ours. And little by little, I began building a new life. Not a better one, not a replacement, but simply a new chapter. Around that same time, my old friend Harold lost his wife too. But Harold reacted differently. He stopped attending the weekly community meetings they used to go to. He stopped gardening. He stopped visiting friends. Instead, he stayed inside his house most days, waiting for his children to visit. At first they came often. They wanted to help him through the grief. But their lives were busy. Work, children, responsibilities. Eventually, the visits became less frequent. Harold began feeling abandoned, even though nobody had truly abandoned him. By the time he turned 80, he had become bitter. Not because he loved his wife more than I loved Clara, but because he expected others to carry the weight of his grief. And no one can truly carry that weight for you. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever experienced a loss that changed your life? Maybe a loved one, a friendship, or even a dream that never happened. If you're comfortable sharing, write, "I've experienced loss" in the comments. You don't need to explain the details. Sometimes just admitting that we've gone through difficult things connects us with others who understand. Because resilience is not about pretending pain doesn't exist. It's about continuing to walk forward, even while carrying it. Now, the fifth lesson might be the most important one of all. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to let the world slowly erase that person. Something interesting happens as people get older. Society begins to treat them differently. Doctors sometimes talk to younger family members instead of speaking directly to you. Store clerks assume you need help, even when you don't ask for it. Even your own children may begin suggesting what they believe is best for you. And sometimes those suggestions come from genuine love. But if you are not careful, those suggestions slowly become decisions made on your behalf. I saw this happen to my friend Walter. Walter was a proud man, independent, intelligent, and active well into his 70s. But his children worried about him living alone after his wife passed away. First, they convinced him to stop driving, saying it would be safer. Then they encouraged him to move closer to them in a smaller apartment. Then they suggested he stop participating in certain hobbies because they believed those activities were risky. Each suggestion sounded reasonable on its own, but together they slowly took control of his life. By the time Walter turned 78, he wasn't making many decisions anymore. His children meant well, but the life he was living no longer felt like his own. And you could see the frustration building inside him. I promised myself I would be careful about that. A few years ago, my daughter Emily gently suggested that I consider moving into an assisted living community. She said it would be safer and that I would have people nearby if something happened. She wasn't being cruel, she was worried. But I thought carefully before answering. Then I told her something very calmly. "Emily, I appreciate your concern, but as long as I can take care of myself, I want to remain in my own home." She tried again a few weeks later, mentioning the benefits and the convenience. And again I listened respectfully, but I kept my answer the same, not angrily, not stubbornly, just clearly. Because knowing who you are means understanding what matters most to you. For me, that meant my independence, my quiet routines, and the ability to make my own choices. Today, at 86, I still wake up in my own house. I still make my own breakfast. I still decide how my day will unfold. Not because I'm stronger than anyone else, but because I learned early that independence must be protected. Let me ask you something here. Do you believe independence becomes more important as we age, or less important? I would really like to know your thoughts. Write independence matters or family support matters more in the comments. Your perspective might be different from mine, and that's okay. Because conversations like this help us understand each other better. So now we've talked about 4 of the most important foundations for staying strong later in life. Your ability to move, your willingness to need less, your health habits, your resilience in the face of loss. And there is still one final truth I want to share with you. It's the one that ties everything together and determines whether these lessons actually protect your freedom or slowly slip away over time. And that final lesson might change the way you look at the years ahead. The final lesson took me the longest to truly understand, and in many ways it connects everything we've talked about so far. It's the quiet understanding that your life is still yours, no matter how many years you have lived. That may sound obvious, but many people slowly forget it as they grow older. When you're young, the world expects you to make decisions. You choose your work, your home, the people you surround yourself with. You build your routines and your identity step by step. But as the years pass, something subtle begins to happen. People start assuming things about you. They assume you're fragile. They assume you're confused. They assume you're no longer capable of shaping your own life. And if you hear those assumptions often enough, there is a danger that you may begin to believe them yourself. That is how many people slowly disappear while they are still alive. Not physically, but in spirit. I remember meeting an old gentleman named Samuel Brooks when I was about 74. Samuel was already well into his 80s at the time. We used to sit on the same park bench in the mornings after our walks. One day I asked him what his secret was. He was still energetic, still curious, still laughing like a much younger man.